My name is Margaret Turner, though most people at work simply called me Mrs. T. For years, I was the woman who never missed a day, never complained, and always gave my best, no matter how much my bones ached or how heavy the weight on my shoulders felt. But one afternoon, as I was stacking paperwork at my desk, the world around me tilted. My chest tightened, my hands grew cold, and before I could even call for help, I collapsed. I remember the sharp echo of my chair clattering to the floor, and then nothing but voices fading in and out. When I opened my eyes again, I was in a white hospital room with wires stuck to my skin and the steady beep of machines reminding me I was still alive. The nurse leaned over me, her voice calm yet firm. "You're lucky, ma'am. We called your son to let him know. He never came." That sentence cut deeper than the chest pain. My son, Michael, the boy I raised alone after his father walked out, hadn't even bothered to show up. I lay there staring at the ceiling, waiting for the door to swing open, for his familiar face to appear. But it never did. Hours turned into a day, and still no Michael. Then came the cruelest blow. A younger nurse slipped her phone into her pocket, whispering to another staff member. But I caught the words. She'd seen a post online. My daughter-in-law, Jessica, had uploaded a smiling photo of herself with the caption, "Finally, a day without the drama queen." I felt my heart sink so far down it might never rise again. There I was, fighting to breathe, fighting to live, and the woman married to my son celebrated my absence like it was a blessing. That was the moment something inside me shifted. I wiped my tears, stared at the ceiling, and made myself a promise. They wanted to see me as a burden, as a joke. Fine. But they had no idea who they were mocking. They forgot that every single thing they lived on, the house they stayed in, the cars they drove, even the money Michael claimed as his own, was mine. When the nurse stepped out, I reached for the hospital phone with trembling fingers. I called my lawyer, Mr. Reynolds. My voice was weak, but steady. I whispered 6 words that would change everything. Sell it all. Change the will. The next day, my son and his wife stormed into the hospital room, their eyes swollen red, their voices breaking as they cried and pleaded at my bedside. "Mom, please don't do this," Michael begged, falling to his knees. Jessica clutched his arm, mascara running down her face. But I just looked at them, silent, my chest rising and falling with slow, deliberate breaths. Inside, I thought, now who's the drama queen? That was the highest point of betrayal and revenge. The day I realized my own child had abandoned me, only to come crawling when his comfort was at risk. But to understand how we got here, you need to know the whole story. The truth is, betrayal doesn't happen in one moment. It builds brick by brick until the entire house of trust comes crashing down. Years earlier, life was different. I was still working at the insurance firm, holding the family together with sheer willpower. Michael had just married Jessica, and though she smiled sweetly at me in those early days, I felt a chill behind her words. She called me Mom at first, but I could tell she said it like it was a mask she wore, not a name she respected. I helped them buy their first home. I signed checks quietly, never mentioning the sacrifices I made. I wanted my son to have the life I never did, a stable marriage, a safe roof, and the freedom to dream. But slowly, I started noticing how little appreciation there was. Jessica rolled her eyes when I visited. Michael barely picked up the phone when I called. Still, I told myself it was fine. Parents are meant to give, not to receive. That's what I believed until the cracks began to show. One evening, I walked into their home with a basket of groceries. Jessica barely looked up from her phone. "Oh, it's you?" she muttered. Michael didn't even come down from his office. I left the basket on the counter and went home with a lump in my throat. It was little things like that at first: cold shoulders, ignored calls, forgotten birthdays. But little by little, the small wounds stacked up until they became unbearable. And now, lying in a hospital bed, I realized all of it had led to this moment. My son's absence, when I collapsed, wasn't an accident. It was who he had become. And Jessica's cruel post wasn't a slip, it was what she truly thought of me. But they didn't realize the power I still had. They thought I was weak, helpless, too old to matter. They thought wrong, because the very empire they stood on was mine. And now, I had already set the wheels in motion to take it all away. The next time they tried to laugh at me, the joke would be theirs to carry. And this, right here, was only the beginning. The morning after my call to Mr. Reynolds, I sat propped up in the hospital bed, sipping lukewarm tea the nurse had brought. My chest still hurt, but it was nothing compared to the ache in my heart. Yet, for the first time in years, I felt a strange calmness. I had finally taken control. Around noon, the door burst open. Michael rushed in first, followed by Jessica, both looking like they had aged 10 years overnight. His tie was crooked, his hair messy, and his eyes bloodshot. Jessica's face was streaked with smeared makeup, her nails tapping nervously against her phone. "Mom." Michael's voice cracked as he dropped to his knees beside my bed. "Please don't do this. We didn't mean it. Jess didn't mean that post." Jessica quickly nodded, her voice trembling but still sharp at the edges. "It was a joke, Mrs. Turner. Just a joke. I didn't think you'd even see it." I looked at them, my lips pressing into a thin line. "A joke? Is that what you call celebrating the day your husband's mother almost died?" My voice was low, calm, but each word struck like glass. Jessica opened her mouth to respond, but shut it when I turned away from her. Michael reached for my hand, but I pulled it back, folding it neatly on my lap. For once, the silence was mine, and it was powerful. That's when the door creaked open again, and in walked Mr. Reynolds, my lawyer. Tall, silver-haired, carrying a briefcase. He looked like a storm in a tailored suit. He gave Michael and Jessica one glance and said flatly, "I've already started the process. The house is listed. The accounts are being transferred. And as of this morning, Mrs. Turner's will has been revised." Jessica gasped, covering her mouth. Michael's face turned ghostly pale. "What? No, you can't just, Mom, please." He turned to Mr. Reynolds. "You can't let her do this." Mr. Reynolds adjusted his glasses. "She's of sound mind, and she can do whatever she pleases with what belongs to her." Jessica's voice cracked like a whip. "But where are we supposed to live? That's our house." I finally turned to her, meeting her eyes. "My house, bought with my money. And the only reason you had it was because I wanted to give my son a chance at happiness. I see now it was wasted." Jessica sank into the visitor's chair, her body shaking. Michael was still on his knees, clutching the edge of the bed, like a child begging for candy. He whispered, "Please, Mom, don't throw us out. Don't do this to me." I tilted my head slightly. "Funny, yesterday, when the doctors called you, you didn't come. But now, when it's your comfort on the line, suddenly you remember you have a mother." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the hum of the machines around me. That was when Mr. Reynolds cleared his throat and added, "I'll return later with the documents for final signatures. I just wanted to inform you everything is proceeding." He nodded to me, then left. Michael looked like he had been punched in the chest. Jessica's hands trembled, so hard she dropped her phone onto the hospital floor. For a long time, I said nothing. I wanted them to sit with it, to feel it. I wanted them to taste the bitterness of betrayal, the same one I had swallowed for years. Finally, I leaned forward slightly. My voice was soft, but cut sharper than any scream could. "Get out, both of you. I need rest. They didn't move at first, but when I repeated the words, they stood and shuffled toward the door like scolded children. Just before leaving, Michael turned back. His lips trembled as he whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom." But I didn't answer. When the door shut, I leaned back against the pillows and exhaled. The tears stung my eyes, but I held them in. This wasn't weakness anymore. It was strength. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was teaching them a lesson they'd never forget. That night, alone in my hospital room, I thought about everything. The little boy I had once cradled in my arms, who now knelt at my bedside, not out of love, but fear of losing comfort. The young man I'd sacrificed for, who let his wife humiliate me online. And deep inside, one question grew louder and louder. What would it take for him to truly understand what he had lost? As I drifted off to sleep, I knew the next chapter of this revenge was only just beginning, because selling the house and changing the will was only the first strike. The real storm was yet to come. The news traveled faster than I expected. By the third day, whispers had spread through the neighborhood, through Michael's friends, and eventually to Jessica's family. My decision was no longer a private matter. It was public knowledge. I was sitting in the hospital cafeteria, stirring a bowl of soup I barely touched, when I overheard two nurses whispering by the vending machine. "Did you hear? Mrs. Turner's selling that big house. Her son and his wife are being kicked out." "No way. I thought they owned it." "Nope. She bought it for them." Imagine that, throwing your own son out. I didn't look up, didn't correct them, didn't say a word. Let the story grow. Sometimes silence is louder than anything you could say. By evening, my phone buzzed nonstop. Unknown numbers, blocked calls, voicemails piling up. Jessica's shrill voice screaming into the receiver, Michael begging, and then her parents. The very same parents who once looked at me as if I was beneath them, who whispered that Michael had married up when he got Jessica. I still remembered the dinner when they smirked across the table, praising their daughter's good fortune. That night, I had smiled politely, saying nothing, but inside, I had felt the sting of being dismissed. Now, here was Jessica's father on my voicemail. "Margaret, let's be reasonable. The kids made a mistake. Don't make them suffer like this. Think of your reputation." My reputation? The same reputation they spat on when Jessica called me a drama queen for nearly dying? The irony nearly made me laugh. 2 days later, I was discharged from the hospital. The crisp autumn air felt like freedom as I stepped outside with my small bag. Mr. Reynolds picked me up personally. "Everything is moving as planned," he said as he helped me into the car. "The house is listed. Buyers are already circling. As for the will, your assets are protected now. Michael and Jessica are no longer beneficiaries." I nodded, my lips curving in the faintest smile. "Good." But when we pulled up to the house, I realized something unexpected. Michael and Jessica were standing on the front lawn. Jessica's mascara was smudged, her hair unbrushed, clutching a bathrobe around her like she hadn't slept. Michael's suit was wrinkled, his shoes untied. They looked nothing like the polished couple who once pranced around, pretending they owned the world. As soon as the car stopped, they rushed forward. Jessica fell to her knees on the driveway, clutching at the hem of my coat. "Please, Mrs. Turner, don't take this from us. This is our home. We'll do better, I swear." Michael's voice cracked as he tried to pull her up. "Mom, please don't do this to me. To us. I was stupid. I was selfish. I should have been there at the hospital. Please forgive me." Their voices trembled, loud enough that neighbors peeked out from their windows, some even stepping outside. I saw Mrs. Gardner across the street shaking her head in disapproval. Another neighbor whispered loudly, "Imagine treating your mother that way." Jessica caught the whispers too. She clutched harder at me, her sobs turning frantic. "People are talking. You're humiliating us." I looked down at her coldly. "No, Jessica, you humiliated yourself the moment you posted that picture." The crowd of neighbors grew, phones raised, recording every tear Jessica shed, every desperate word Michael spoke. It was all being captured. By morning, I knew it would be everywhere. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I simply walked past them, up the steps, and into the house. Their cries followed me, echoing in the crisp evening air, but I didn't look back. That night, as I sat in my living room, I thought of how things had shifted. For years, I had been the quiet mother, the silent supporter, the one who never demanded respect. But now, the tables had turned. Michael and Jessica were the ones on display, begging, pleading, while the world judged them. And yet, deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. This was only the second strike. Revenge wasn't about anger, it was about lessons. And the biggest lesson was still waiting. Because tomorrow, the papers would go through. And once the sale was official, they would lose everything they thought was theirs. And that was when the real begging would begin. The next morning, the sky was gray and heavy, almost as if it knew a storm was about to break. I sat by the window with a cup of tea, my lawyer's folder sitting neatly on the table beside me. Today was the day everything became official. At 10 a.m., Mr. Reynolds arrived with the documents. His shoes clicked against the hardwood floor as he walked in, calm and professional. As always, he laid the papers before me, smoothing them out carefully. "Mrs. Turner, once you sign these, the house will no longer be in Michael's name. The proceeds will be transferred directly into your account. And as for the will," he paused, adjusting his glasses, "it's been changed. Michael and Jessica have no claims. Everything will now go to the community trust you requested." I felt my chest tighten with both pain and pride. The trust had been my quiet dream for years, a fund to help struggling single mothers, women like me who had raised children alone, working day and night. If my own son no longer valued me, maybe the world would. I picked up the pen. My hand trembled, not from doubt, but from the weight of years of betrayal finally reaching its peak. I signed, one stroke after another. When I finished, I closed the folder, slid it back to Mr. Reynolds, and whispered, "It's done." By noon, the news had already reached Michael and Jessica. I was in the living room when I heard frantic knocking at the door. Michael's voice shouted from outside, broken, almost childlike. "Mom, open up, please. We need to talk." Jessica's voice followed, higher-pitched, desperate. "You can't just throw us out. This isn't fair. We're family. Family. The word burned my ears. Family is supposed to be there when you collapse, not call you a burden. Family is supposed to love you, not post cruel photos online for the world to laugh at." I didn't answer. I simply let them knock until their voices cracked. Eventually, silence followed, but I knew it wouldn't last long. Later that afternoon, I went for a quiet walk around the neighborhood. The autumn leaves crunched under my shoes, and the chill air brushed my cheeks. But as I walked, whispers followed me. Neighbors leaned over fences, some nodding with respect, others murmuring in shock. "That's her, the mother who disowned her son. Good for her. They treated her terribly. Still selling the house. That's cold." I kept my head high. Let them talk. People will always talk. What mattered was that the truth was spreading. For once, it wasn't me being humiliated. It was Michael and Jessica. When I turned the corner back to the house, my heart skipped. There they were again. But this time, they weren't alone. Jessica's parents had come. Her mother, dressed in a fur coat too heavy for the weather, stood with arms crossed. Her father looked furious red in the face, pacing the driveway. Jessica was sobbing openly, clinging to her mother's side, while Michael stood slumped, staring at the ground like a lost boy. As soon as they saw me, Jessica's father marched forward. "Margaret, what on earth are you doing? You're ruining your own family. Throwing your son out like trash? Over what a silly mistake." I stopped at the bottom of the steps, meeting his glare, without flinching. A silly mistake. Ignoring me when I collapsed at work wasn't a mistake. It was abandonment. Mocking me online when I could have been dying wasn't a mistake. It was cruelty. Jessica's mother sighed dramatically, patting her daughter's head. "She didn't mean it. Margaret, you're overreacting." My voice dropped lower, sharper. "If your daughter called you a drama queen while you were in a hospital bed, would you call that an overreaction?" Silence. Jessica's parents shifted uncomfortably, but they didn't answer. Michael finally lifted his head, his face streaked with tears. "Mom, please, don't do this. I'll change. I'll do anything. Just don't take the house. Don't cut me off." The crowd of neighbors was back again. Phones raised, whispers spreading like wildfire. Everyone was watching. I took a deep breath, then delivered the final blow of the day. "It's already done. The house isn't yours anymore. And neither is my legacy. You chose to treat me like a burden. Now you can carry your own weight." Jessica collapsed onto the driveway, wailing, her parents scrambling to comfort her. Michael stumbled forward, but stopped when I held up a hand. "No, Michael, save your tears. You'll need them when reality sets in." Then I turned, unlocked the front door, and stepped inside. The last thing I heard before the door shut was the sound of Jessica's cry breaking into a scream, the kind that came from a heart shattering into pieces. But I didn't look back, because for once they were the ones in pain, not me. And yet I knew this wasn't the end. This was only the beginning. The house was no longer theirs. The papers had been signed, the accounts shifted, and for the first time in years, the balance of power was no longer in Michael and Jessica's hands. That night, I stayed in the guest room of a friend's house while Mr. Reynolds arranged the transfer of property. Meanwhile, Michael and Jessica remained in the now empty house, clinging to it like ghosts haunting a place that no longer belonged to them. By morning, the fallout began. Jessica's friends were the first to turn. She had built her little empire on appearances, designer clothes, fancy dinners, girls' nights she boasted about on Instagram. But those things only held weight because everyone believed she was living the life of a wealthy daughter-in-law. Now, the truth had spread. The neighbors who recorded her begging on the driveway had posted the video online. It didn't take long before her friends saw it. The captions were brutal. Turns out the queen bee was living in her Emile's house all along. Imagine mocking the woman paying for your roof. No wonder she called her a drama queen. Jealousy much? One by one, her friends stopped replying. Her social media went quiet. The likes dwindled. The comments turned cruel. Michael wasn't spared either. At his office, whispers followed him down every hallway. "That's the guy whose mom cut him off." Some said it with pity, others with disgust. His boss pulled him into a meeting that morning, folding his hands across the desk. "Michael, this company values loyalty and integrity. It doesn't look good when employees' private matters paint them in such a poor light. I think it's best you take a leave of absence." In other words, he was suspended. By the third day, they had lost more than just reputation. The utilities on the house had been switched into my name again. Electricity was cut. Internet gone. Jessica screamed when the water shut off mid-shower. Michael tried to call me 10 times, 20, but I didn't answer. Instead, I spent that evening at a community fundraiser, quietly watching as people approached me. Some offered sympathy, others respect. A few whispered, "Good for you, Margaret." It's about time parents stood up to entitled children. It was strange, after years of invisibility, to suddenly be seen, not just as a mother, but as a woman with power. Meanwhile, Michael and Jessica's private life crumbled behind closed doors. "You did this." Jessica's voice was raw as she screamed at him. "If you had gone to the hospital like a decent son, none of this would have happened." Michael shouted back, his voice breaking. "Me? You're the one who posted that picture. You called her a drama queen. Now, we're the ones looking pathetic. You should have stopped her from doing this. You should have talked to her." Jessica threw a glass against the wall, the shards scattering across the floor. "You're weak, Michael." Weak. But Michael didn't fight back. He slumped onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. For the first time, the golden boy I had raised looked like a man stripped bare. His pride shattered. The real blow came the next morning. Jessica's parents returned, furious, demanding answers. But instead of sympathy, they found themselves shamed too. Neighbors whispered about how their daughter had leached off me, how they had raised a woman who celebrated another's pain. Jessica's father's face turned red with rage. "Do you realize what this has done to our family name?" Jessica broke down, completely. "What about me? I've lost everything." Her mother sneered. "You brought this on yourself. You married into money, not realizing the woman behind it was stronger than you." And just like that, Jessica realized she had no allies left. Not her friends, not her parents, not even her husband, who was sinking into his own despair. I sat by my window that night, the cool breeze drifting through the curtains. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't laughing. Revenge isn't about joy. It's about justice. And justice doesn't always feel sweet. Sometimes it feels heavy, necessary, like closing a door you once prayed would stay open. Michael and Jessica were beginning to learn what they had lost. But I knew this was still only the surface, because the more they begged, the deeper the lesson would cut. And soon, they would learn that the cost of cruelty is always higher than you expect. The week after I signed the papers, I returned to work. The doctor had cleared me for light duty, and though my body still felt tired, I wanted the routine. I wanted to sit at my desk, file papers, and see familiar faces who treated me with respect. That morning, I walked into the office with my lunch bag tucked under my arm. People looked up from their cubicles, some smiling, some whispering. I knew why. By now, most of them had seen the viral video of my son and daughter-in-law crying on the driveway. Some co-workers approached me quietly. "Mrs. Turner, we saw what happened. Good for you. You deserve better. You're stronger than any of us could ever be." I thanked them politely, though my heart ached. I hadn't wanted my private life to become a public spectacle, but perhaps it was unavoidable. When people mock you loudly, sometimes the only answer is to let the world see the truth. Around noon, just as I was settling back into a rhythm, the office doors slammed open. Michael and Jessica. Jessica's hair was wild, her coat half-buttoned, mascara streaked down her cheeks. Michael looked hollow, like a man who hadn't slept in days. They didn't care who was watching. They stormed across the room, straight to my desk. "Mom." Michael's voice cracked so loudly that half the office froze mid-conversation. "Please, we need to talk. Please, don't do this to us." Jessica clutched his arm, tears spilling. "We're begging you. Please, give us back the house, the money, something. People are laughing at us, mocking us. We can't live like this." I glanced around. Phones were out. My coworkers were recording, whispering. Some mouths hung open in shock. Others shook their heads in disbelief. I stood slowly, meeting their eyes with calm that only years of heartbreak could forge. "Michael." "Jessica, this is not the place." Michael's voice rose, desperate. "Then tell me where." "Mom." "Tell me when." I'll do anything you want. Just stop this. I've lost my job. Jess has lost her friends. We've lost everything. Jessica's sobs echoed through the office. You've ruined us. Please, I'll delete the post. I'll apologize. Just stop. The humiliation was complete. Two people who once strutted proudly now knelt, literally, on the gray office carpet in front of dozens of strangers. Jessica clung to my legs, crying so hard her voice broke into gasps. Michael buried his face in his hands. For a moment, I just stood there. Then, in a voice steady and cold, I said, "You didn't lose everything because of me. You lost it because of your choices. You chose cruelty. You chose selfishness. Now you're facing the cost." Silence. The entire office was frozen, waiting. Jessica let out a choked sob. "Then what do you want from us? Tell us. We'll do anything." I bent down slightly, my face close to hers, my voice just loud enough for everyone to hear. "What I want is for you to finally understand what love means. Not money, not comfort, love. Until you do, you'll keep falling." I straightened, gathered my papers, and walked out of the office. Behind me, I could still hear Jessica wailing and Michael whispering my name like a child calling for a mother in the dark. That evening, the video of their public breakdown was everywhere. Shared, commented on, dissected. Headlines read, "Couple who mocked mother bags at her office." Even people who didn't know us had opinions. Some called me cruel. Others called me brave. But the loudest voices said the same thing. They deserved it. That night, alone in my small apartment, I sat with a cup of tea and let myself cry, not for revenge, not for power, but for the son I had lost long before this war began. Because beneath all the noise, one truth haunted me. I still loved him. He was still my child. But maybe loving him now meant letting him feel the weight of his mistakes until he changed. And I knew this. His fall wasn't over yet. The storm was still building. The office breakdown spread like wildfire online. By the next morning, their faces were everywhere. Michael's hollow, desperate eyes. Jessica's ruined makeup, her body curled at my feet. Strangers dissected every frame, some mocking, some pitying, but all pointing at the same truth. This once proud couple had been shattered in front of the world. But humiliation does strange things to people. Sometimes it humbles them. Sometimes it hardens them. And sometimes it makes them turn on each other. Jessica was the first to snap. 3 days after the office incident, she posted on social media. A shaky video, mascara smudged, her voice dripping with rage and self-pity. "This is all Michael's fault," she said, pointing the camera at herself. "He abandoned his mother when she was sick. I told him to go. I begged him to go, but he wouldn't listen. And now look at us. Look at what his decisions have cost me. My friends, my reputation, my home, all gone because of him." Her followers, what was left of them, flooded the comments. Some believed her. Others didn't. But the damage was done. Jessica had turned on her own husband, dragging him through the mud to try and save herself. Michael saw it, of course. The video spread through his phone before he could even process it. That night, they fought so loudly the neighbors heard every word. "You betrayed me," Michael shouted, his voice raw. "You told the world this was all on me. You're the one who mocked my mother online. You're the one who called her a drama queen." Jessica screamed back, her voice shrill. "And you're the one who let her strip us of everything. You couldn't even stand up to her. Michael, you're weak. A real man would have stopped her." The argument ended with Jessica slamming the bedroom door and Michael collapsing onto the couch, staring at nothing. The last thread between them had snapped. Meanwhile, I sat in my quiet apartment, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, sipping tea. The phone buzzed again, another voicemail from Michael. His voice was softer this time, weaker, broken. Mom, Jess left. She packed her things and went back to her parents. She says it's all my fault. Maybe she's right. Maybe I really am weak. I don't know who I am anymore. I don't even have a place to stay. Please, Mom. I'm not asking for the house. I'm not asking for money. Just please don't give up on me. I closed my eyes, pressing the phone against my chest. For a moment, my heart trembled. He sounded like the little boy I used to comfort when he had nightmares. But then the memory of the hospital returned. The silence when the doctors called, the laughter in Jessica's post. Love and pain twisted together inside me. I didn't call back. 2 days later, I saw Michael again, but not the way I expected. It was Sunday morning. I was leaving the grocery store, bags in hand, when I noticed someone sitting on the curb by the parking lot. Head down, suit wrinkled, hair unkempt. It was Michael. He looked up when he heard my footsteps. His eyes were red-rimmed, swollen. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Mom, his voice cracked. I don't have anywhere to go. The cars passed, people walked by, but in that moment it felt like time stopped. I stood frozen, the weight of his words sinking deep. He was finally stripped of everything, his pride, his wife, his home. And now, for the first time in years, he was facing me not as the entitled son who took and took, but as a broken man asking for something real. I tightened my grip on the grocery bags. My heart screamed to hug him, to forgive him, to end it all here. But my mind whispered, not yet. He hasn't learned enough. So I said the hardest words a mother could say. Michael, you need to stand on your own feet. Until you do, you'll never change. His face crumbled, but I walked past him, my steps steady even as tears burned in my eyes. Behind me, I heard his whisper carried on the wind. I'm sorry, Mom. But I didn't turn back. That night, alone in my apartment, I sat in silence, staring at the dark window. The revenge had taken everything from him, but the real question lingered heavy in my chest. Would it also take everything from me? Because no matter how much pain he caused me, Michael was still my son. And the deeper he fell, the harder it became to decide where justice ended and forgiveness began. And I knew the next step in this story would test not just him, but me. The breaking point came sooner than I imagined. 3 weeks had passed since I signed the house away. Jessica had disappeared into her parents' estate, hiding behind their wealth and whispering poison about Michael to anyone who would listen. She painted herself as the victim, a poor young wife caught in the crossfire of a bitter feud between a mother and her son. She gave interviews to anyone with a camera, sitting tall with crocodile tears. It's been devastating, she said to one local reporter, her voice trembling just enough to sound rehearsed. I loved Margaret like my own mother, but she destroyed us. She left us homeless. She left us humiliated. And Michael, well, he just wasn't strong enough to stand up for me. Her words spread like wildfire. Some pitied her, some didn't. But the more she spoke, the more Michael became the villain. He was painted as weak, heartless, careless, the son who abandoned his sick mother and then dragged his wife down with him. And while Jessica was on television, wearing borrowed pearls, Michael was in the gutter. I heard about it first from Mrs. Gardner, the neighbor who always seemed to know everything. She called one afternoon, her voice low but urgent. Margaret, I saw him. Michael. He was outside the diner downtown, sitting on the curb with a paper cup. He looked like he hadn't eaten in days. I froze, the phone pressed to my ear. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. My son, my boy, begging in the street. I thanked her quickly and hung up, but the image wouldn't leave me. That evening, I went for a walk downtown. I told myself it was just to clear my head, but really, I was looking for him. And there he was, sitting slumped against the brick wall of the diner, his suit filthy, his hair unwashed, a paper cup at his feet with only a few coins inside. My heart cracked in half. People walked past him, some glancing in pity, others sneering. A couple of teenagers pointed and laughed. But Michael just stared at the ground, empty. I stepped closer, my hands trembling. Michael, I whispered. He looked up slowly. His eyes were bloodshot, his cheeks hollow. And when he saw me, his face twisted, not with anger, not with pride, but with shame. Mom, his voice was barely a whisper. I have nothing. Tears blurred my vision. For years, I had begged him to grow up, to take responsibility, to learn empathy. And now, here he was, finally broken enough to see. He lowered his head, his shoulders shaking. I don't want your money. I don't want the house. I just want you to forgive me. The words struck me like a knife. All the bitterness, all the anger, all the years of being dismissed, they warred with the motherly love I had buried under layers of pain. For a moment, I almost reached for him. Almost. But then I remembered Jessica's smirk in that photo. Finally, a day without the drama queen. The cruelty, the abandonment, the humiliation. And I pulled my hand back. You'll get my forgiveness, I said quietly, when you've earned it. Michael broke then. He sank to the sidewalk, sobbing openly in front of strangers. His shoulders shook like a child lost in the dark. I turned and walked away, my own tears streaming silently down my cheeks. That night, the community buzzed with talk. People had seen me walking away from my son in the street. Some called me heartless. Others said I was strong. But I knew the truth. There was no strength in watching your own child suffer. There was only survival. And yet, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, one thought burned through me. How much more can he take before he breaks completely? 2 days later, the answer came. I was at home when I heard a knock at the door. When I opened it, 2 police officers stood there, their faces solemn. Mrs. Turner, we found your son downtown. He got into a fight. Someone tried to rob him. He's hurt, but he's alive. My heart nearly stopped. And in that moment, I realized something. This revenge of mine, this punishment, it had cut deep, too deep. And if I wasn't careful, I might lose him forever. The question that haunted me now wasn't whether Michael had learned his lesson. It was whether I could forgive him before it was too late. The hospital smell hit me before I even stepped through the door. Sterile, sharp, the same scent I remembered from the night I collapsed. Only this time, it wasn't me lying in the bed. It was Michael. When I walked into his room, my knees nearly buckled. He lay there with a swollen lip, a bruise blooming purple across his cheek, and stitches above his eyebrow. His right hand was wrapped in bandages, his arm hooked 2 and 4. He looked so small, so fragile. Not the arrogant man who once ignored my calls, not the proud husband who let his wife mock me, but my little boy again. His eyes fluttered open when he sensed me there. For a second, I thought he'd look away in shame. But he didn't. He held my gaze, tears gathering in the corners of his eyes. Mom, he whispered. His voice cracked like dry wood. I didn't come that day, not because I didn't care. I froze. I stood frozen myself, my hands gripping the metal rail of the bed. Michael swallowed hard, his throat bobbing. The doctor called me. I heard the words, "Your mother collapsed." And something inside me just shut down. All I could see was Dad. The day he left. You crying. The hospital calls back then when he walked out on us. I hated hospitals. I hated the reminders. And instead of running to you, I panicked. I told myself you'd be fine, because you always were. And then Jess saw me sitting there and said, "Forget her. She's always dramatic." And I let her voice be louder than mine. His tears slid down into his pillow. I should have come, he whispered. I should have been there. I wasn't. And I'll never forgive myself for it. The silence was so heavy it felt like the machines had stopped beeping. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to tell him that freezing wasn't an excuse, that his wife's cruelty didn't erase his choice. But as I looked at him, bandaged, broken, begging, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Truth. He wasn't defending himself. He wasn't blaming me. He was admitting the raw, ugly truth of his failure. I pulled a chair closer and sat down, my hand shaking as I reached for his. He flinched at first, as if he didn't deserve it, but then he let me hold it. His grip was weak, trembling, but it was there. "Michael," I whispered, my voice cracking, "you hurt me more than anyone ever could, but you're still my son, and I won't let this world take you from me, even if you've nearly broken me in the process." His tears fell harder. He pressed my hand against his cheek like a child. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'll never stop saying it. I need a chance to make it right." Later that night, as I sat by his bedside, Jessica's name flashed across his phone. He didn't answer. He turned it face down, his jaw tightening. "She doesn't care," he said softly, almost to himself. "Not about me, not about us. It was always about the money, the image. I see it now, and I'm done chasing her approval." The words surprised me, but deep inside, I knew this was the turning point. The marriage was unraveling, and for the first time, Michael was beginning to stand on his own, painfully, slowly, but genuinely. The next morning, as sunlight poured weakly through the blinds, Michael dozed while I sat reading by his side. The door opened, and in walked Jessica. Perfect makeup, expensive coat, crocodile tears already painted on her face. "Oh, Michael!" she cried dramatically, rushing to his side. "Baby, I came as soon as I heard." Michael's eyes opened slowly. He looked at her, then at me. For the first time, I saw something hard in his expression. Not love, not weakness, but resolve. "Jess," he said quietly, "leave." Her eyes widened. "What?" "Michael, it's me. I'm your wife." His voice cracked, but he didn't falter. "No, you're the reason I lost everything. You're the reason I turned my back on my own mother. And now you want to play the savior? No, not anymore. Get out." The silence was thunderous. Jessica's face twisted, shock flashing into rage. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "When you crawl back, don't expect me to be waiting." She spun on her heels and stormed out, her heels clacking against the tile. Michael slumped back against the pillow, his eyes closing, tears slipping down his face. But there was no regret in his expression, only relief. And as I sat there, holding his hand, I realized the boy I raised was still somewhere inside him. Bruised, battered, but still there. The question now wasn't whether he could change. The question was whether I could forgive him fully before it was too late. Because forgiveness, I knew, wasn't just about words, it was about action. And soon, the world would demand mine. The days following Jessica's outburst were calm only on the surface. Michael remained in the hospital to recover, and for the first time in years, we spoke like mother and son again. He apologized over and over, not in grand speeches, but in small, quiet ways, asking if I'd eaten, holding my hand when he thought I'd drifted off, even whispering prayers when he thought I couldn't hear. But peace never lasts long when someone like Jessica is involved. It started with a letter. A thick white envelope arrived at my apartment. The words Turner versus Turner stamped across the top. My heart sank even before I tore it open. Inside, Jessica's lawyers had filed a motion. She was suing Michael for spousal support, claiming he had left her destitute and dependent, unable to sustain the lifestyle she was accustomed to. Worse still, she was trying to drag me into it. The documents alleged that since much of their lifestyle had been funded through Margaret Turner's assets, she bore responsibility for maintaining Jessica's quality of life. I almost laughed when I read it, bitterly, disbelievingly. Jessica, who mocked me, who celebrated my collapse, who knelt on my driveway begging for what wasn't hers, now wanted the court to force me to keep feeding her greed. When I showed the letter to Michael, his face drained of color. She can't do this, he whispered, clutching the papers. Mom, I'll fight her. I swear. I'll stand in front of the judge and tell them everything. For the first time, I believed him. He wasn't the same son who hid behind her anymore. He was ready to face her. The first court hearing was packed. Reporters had caught wind of the feud, and by the time we entered, cameras flashed outside the courthouse. Jessica walked in wearing pearls and a white coat, crocodile tears glittering at the corners of her eyes. She clutched her attorney's arm as if she were the wronged saint of the story. Michael and I entered quietly, side by side. For once, he wasn't hiding behind me. He carried himself with a strange dignity, even though his suit was borrowed and his face still bore faint bruises. When the judge called the case, Jessica's lawyer painted her as a victim. My client has suffered humiliation, financial devastation, and emotional abuse at the hands of this family. She has been stripped of her home, her livelihood, and her social standing, all because of the vindictive actions of her mother-in-law and the negligence of her husband. Jessica dabbed her eyes delicately with a tissue, nodding at every word. When it was Michael's turn, he stood. His voice shook at first, but it grew steadier with every sentence. Your Honor, my wife isn't destitute. She has wealthy parents who fund her every whim. She never lifted a finger in our marriage. Everything was handed to her. My mother sacrificed everything for me, and I betrayed her. Jessica mocked her, humiliated her, and encouraged me to ignore her when she collapsed. This isn't about spousal support. This is about revenge, about greed. And I won't let her drag my mother into this. The courtroom murmured. The judge's brows knitted. Jessica's smile faltered. Then the judge looked at me. Mrs. Turner, do you have anything you wish to say? I rose slowly, gripping the bench before me. My voice was calm, but every word carried years of weight. I am a mother who nearly died alone because my son and his wife chose cruelty over kindness. Everything they lived in, every luxury, came from my sacrifices. If Jessica wants spousal support, let her parents provide it. But not one more penny will come from me. The judge nodded. Noted. The ruling didn't happen that day. It was postponed, dragging us into weeks of legal back and forth. But the tide had shifted. For the first time, Jessica was on the defensive. And as she fought, her mask began to slip. Reporters uncovered the truth about her social media posts. Screenshots of her mocking me spread across the internet. Friends who once sided with her came forward with stories of how she ridiculed me at parties. Her carefully crafted image of a grieving wife shattered. But she didn't stop. If anything, she grew more desperate. She called Michael in the dead of night, leaving voicemails filled with threats. If you don't side with me, I'll ruin you. I'll ruin your mother. I'll make sure no one ever looks at you with respect again. Michael saved every message. He looked at me one night, eyes weary but determined. She's not going to win this time. Not against me. Not against us. For the first time, I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. Then we'll fight together. But as I looked into his eyes, a question gnawed at me. Could I truly trust him again? Or was this just desperation? Another act of survival until he found comfort elsewhere? Time would tell. And I had a feeling Jessica wasn't done yet. Because people like her never go quietly. They burn everything on their way out. The weeks crawled forward, each court date dragging Jessica's mask further down until her true face showed. But just when I thought she had exhausted every trick, she played her most desperate card. It began with whispers. A reporter cornered me outside the courthouse one morning shoving a microphone in my face. "Mrs. Turner, how do you respond to allegations that you manipulated your son and controlled all of his finances for years?" I blinked, stunned. "Excuse me?" The reporter thrust a folder toward me. Inside were documents, bank statements, wire transfers, even emails that supposedly showed I siphoned Michael's money into my own accounts. Only they weren't real. The numbers were wrong, the signatures forged. But to the untrained eye, it looked convincing. Jessica had fabricated evidence. That night, Michael stormed into my apartment, his phone in hand. His face was pale, his eyes burning with rage. "She's saying you stole from me, Mom. She's telling the world you kept me broke, that you cut me off and controlled me my whole life." He threw his phone down, the screen flashing Jessica's newest post. "The truth will come out. Margaret Turner isn't the victim. She's the manipulator. She ruined my marriage, she brainwashed my husband, and now she's trying to destroy me too." Thousands of comments swarmed under it. Some believed her, some didn't. But the damage was real. People were talking again. Michael's fists clenched. "I won't let her get away with this. I'll testify. I'll tell the court everything. I'll expose her for the liar she is." I studied him. For the first time, I saw not the broken man on the curb, not the ashamed son in the hospital, but a man standing tall. My son, not perfect, not healed, but finally strong. "Then we fight," I said quietly. The next court hearing was electric. Reporters filled every bench, cameras flashing as Jessica swept in, clutching her fake documents like a trophy. She smiled, her head high, convinced she had already won. Her lawyer stood, his voice booming. "Your Honor, we have evidence that Margaret Turner abused her financial control over her son. She manipulated his accounts, restricted his access to his own money, and then used this power to cut off my client, Mrs. Jessica Turner." Gasps rippled through the room. Jessica dabbed her eyes, pretending to cry. The judge turned to us. "Mr. Turner, is this true?" Michael rose slowly, adjusting his tie. He looked at Jessica for a long moment. His wife, the woman he had once defended blindly, the woman he had chosen over his own mother. His voice was steady, calm, but filled with fire. "No, Your Honor, it's not true. My mother didn't steal from me. She didn't manipulate me. The truth is, I let Jessica control me. I let her words be louder than my own. I abandoned my mother when she needed me most because I was too weak to stand up to my wife. And everything I lost, my job, my friends, my respect, I lost because of Jessica's greed and cruelty. She mocked my mother while she was fighting for her life. She lied to me, and now she's lying to this court." The courtroom buzzed. Jessica's face went white, then red. Michael pulled his phone from his pocket. "I have proof," he said, his voice louder now. Voicemails, texts, Jessica threatening me, threatening my mother, admitting she only cared about money. He played them aloud. Her shrill voice filled the courtroom. "If you don't side with me, I'll ruin you. I'll ruin your mother. You'll have nothing without me." The room erupted. Reporters scribbled furiously. The judge slammed the gavel. Jessica's lawyer tried to recover, stammering. These could be doctored. But it was too late. The mask had shattered. Jessica leapt to her feet, screaming across the courtroom. "You liar! You pathetic, spineless liar! You'd still be nothing if it wasn't for me." The judge's gavel struck again. "Enough! Sit down or you'll be held in contempt." But Jessica couldn't stop. Her rage poured out, every word revealing the venom she had hidden for years. And in that moment, everyone saw her clearly not as a victim, but as the abuser she truly was. When the hearing ended, Michael and I walked out side by side into a storm of flashing cameras. Reporters shouted questions, microphones shoved into our faces. Mrs. Turner, do you feel vindicated? Michael, are you filing for divorce? Michael didn't answer. He just looked at me, his eyes softer than they had been in years. And for the first time, I saw not just my son, but a man who might finally be ready to rebuild. That night, sitting in my apartment with the city lights flickering through the window, I realized something. My revenge was almost complete. Jessica's lies were crumbling, her reputation in ruins. Michael had fallen lower than he ever thought possible, but in losing everything, he had found something worth more than money: humility. But I knew the story wasn't finished yet. Because revenge isn't just about punishing the guilty. It's about deciding whether forgiveness has a place when the dust settles. And soon, I would have to make that choice. The courtroom incident broke Jessica's carefully painted image wide open. Overnight, she went from being a wronged wife to a public spectacle. Clips of her screaming at the judge circulated online, paired with her earlier interviews where she played the innocent victim. Side by side, the hypocrisy was undeniable. But Jessica wasn't the type to retreat quietly. 2 nights later, as I sat in my apartment with the news muted on the TV, my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. If you don't stop this, I'll expose everything. Family secrets. Things Michael doesn't know. You'll regret crossing me. My chest tightened. Secrets? What could she possibly mean? For a moment, old ghosts stirred. Memories of Michael's father, the man who walked out when Michael was still young. The nights I cried in silence so my son wouldn't hear. The lies I'd told to protect him from the truth of his father's betrayal. Could Jessica have found something buried in that past? The next day, I got my answer. Jessica held a press conference outside the courthouse, her hair styled, her lips painted bright red, her eyes cold. The reporters swarmed around her as she held up a folder dramatically. This, she declared, is proof that Margaret Turner has lied for years. Proof that she's not the saint she pretends to be. If the court won't give me justice, the public will. Michael, and I watched the broadcast together from the hospital's lounge. His jaw clenched, his hands shaking. What is she talking about, Mom? What secrets? I didn't answer immediately. The fear gnawed at me. Had Jessica dug up the truth about his father? About the real reason he left us? On the screen, Jessica flipped through papers, waving them for the cameras. For years, Michael was told his father abandoned him. But the truth is, she paused for dramatic effect, letting the crowd lean in. Margaret Turner pushed him away. She manipulated him into leaving. She told lies to cover her own failures as a wife. And now, she's punishing me the same way she punished him. Gasps rippled through the reporters. Michael's eyes widened. That's not true. Tell me it's not true. I grabbed his hand. It's not. Michael, listen to me. Your father left because he couldn't handle responsibility. He was weak. I never forced him out. I begged him to stay. I shielded you from the truth because I didn't want you to hate him. I wanted you to believe he just drifted away, not that he abandoned us outright. Tears stung my eyes. If that was a lie, it was one I told to protect you, not to hurt you. Michael's eyes searched mine, desperate for honesty. And for the first time in years, he believed me. I saw it in the way his shoulders dropped, the way his grip on my hand tightened. She's lying, he whispered. She'll say anything to destroy us. But Jessica wasn't done. Later that week, she released doctored emails supposedly proving that I had manipulated Michael's father out of the marriage. Though obviously fake, they spread online like wildfire. Headlines screamed, "Family feud deepens. Was Margaret Turner the villain all along?" Michael and I walked through the courthouse doors to a storm of reporters. Microphones shoved into our faces, questions firing from every direction. Mrs. Turner, did you really drive your husband away? Michael, do you believe your wife or your mother? Is this the end of your family legacy? Michael froze, overwhelmed by the noise. But I stepped forward, my voice steady despite the chaos. My husband left because he was weak, not because of me. My son may not remember the nights I cried myself to sleep, but I do. And I will not allow Jessica Turner to rewrite history for her own gain. The reporters shouted more questions, but I walked past them, head held high. Inside, Michael whispered, "She's desperate. She knows she's losing." I nodded, though my heart was heavy. Desperate people don't stop. When they're cornered, they lash out. They burn everything down. And I had a feeling Jessica's next move would be her most dangerous yet. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The revenge that had begun with one phone call, one set of 6 words, had spiraled into a war bigger than I imagined. Jessica wasn't just fighting for money anymore. She was fighting for survival, clawing, biting, ready to drag us both into the fire if it meant she wouldn't go down alone. And as I closed my eyes, I knew the storm hadn't peaked yet. The worst was still to come. Jessica's lies had started to collapse in the public eye. The fake emails, the crocodile tears, the staged interviews, people weren't buying them anymore. Her story shifted every time a new piece of truth surfaced, and the cracks in her mask were too big to hide. But a woman like Jessica doesn't surrender. She pivots. She claws. She digs until she finds a new weapon. And this time, that weapon was Michael. It was late one evening when Michael's phone buzzed. He was sitting across from me at the kitchen table, quietly sipping coffee while I sorted through bills. He frowned at the screen, then excused himself to the balcony. I watched through the sliding door as he answered the call. At first, his face was neutral, but then his jaw tightened, his eyes narrowed, and his hand gripped the railing so tightly I thought it might snap. When he came back inside, his face was pale. "Jessica," he muttered, "what does she want now?" I asked. He hesitated, staring down at the table like a boy caught doing something wrong. Then he whispered, "She says she is proof I did something illegal at work, that I signed off on deals that broke company policy. She says if I don't testify in her favor at the next hearing, she'll hand it over to the press. She says I'll lose everything." I froze. "Michael, did you?" His silence was the loudest answer. He rubbed his temples. Yes, I did. I was careless. I signed papers I shouldn't have because Jessica told me it was fine. If this gets out, I won't just lose my job. I could face charges." My chest tightened. It was worse than I thought. Jessica wasn't bluffing. She had real leverage now. Michael's voice cracked. "Mom, what do I do?" The next day, Jessica made her move. She sent Michael an email attaching copies of the documents. Her words were sharp, venomous. "You have 2 choices, Michael. Stand with me in court and convince the judge to grant me spousal support, or watch your precious career and reputation burn. Choose wisely." Michael showed me the message, his hands shaking. "She'll ruin me, Mom. She'll ruin everything." I placed a hand on his. "Son, she already has. The only way she wins is if you let her drag you back down into the mud." He looked at me, tears in his eyes. "But if I don't, I could lose everything." "Jail, Mom. Jail." I leaned closer, my voice firm. "No, Michael. If you do what she says, you'll lose something worse, your soul. You've already started to climb out of the hole she dug for you. Don't crawl back in." The next court date arrived. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Jessica sat smugly at her table, her lawyer whispering in her ear. Her eyes locked on Michael like a predator certain of victory. When the judge asked for testimony, Jessica's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, My client would like to submit additional evidence. Documents showing that Mr. Michael Turner engaged in unethical practices at his former job. We believe this demonstrates his lack of credibility. The courtroom gasped. The judge looked at Michael. Do you wish to respond to these allegations? Michael stood. For a moment, his voice shook, but then he drew a deep breath. Yes, Your Honor. I signed those papers. I was careless, but I wasn't acting alone. Jessica encouraged me to do it. She told me it was harmless, that everyone did it. And now she's using it to blackmail me into lying in her favor. Gasps rippled again. Jessica's face twisted, fury flashing behind her fake tears. Michael's voice grew stronger. I may lose my career. I may face consequences, but I will not let her drag my mother through the dirt anymore. I'd rather face the truth than live under her thumb. The courtroom was silent. The judge's eyes narrowed as he scribbled notes. Reporters scribbled furiously. And Jessica's mask finally cracked for good. She slammed her hands on the table and screamed, "You coward! You'd rather rot in jail than save your wife." The judge banged his gavel. "Mrs. Turner, control yourself." But Jessica couldn't. Her rage spilled over. "He's nothing without me. Nothing. And that old woman, she turned him against me. She ruined everything." The courtroom was chaos, and everyone saw her for what she truly was. When it ended, Michael slumped into the bench beside me, exhausted but lighter somehow. He looked at me with red eyes. "I told the truth, Mom. For once, I told the truth." I squeezed his hand. "And that's how you'll win. Not by lies. Not by fear. By finally standing as your own man." But as we left the courthouse, I knew Jessica wasn't finished. People like her never stop until they've destroyed everything around them. Or themselves. And something told me the final explosion was coming soon. The kind that would end this war once and for all. The courtroom erupted after Michael's confession, but the storm outside grew even wilder. By the time we stepped onto the courthouse steps, the media was everywhere. Cameras flashed, microphones shoved into our faces. "Michael, are you admitting to criminal activity?" "Mrs. Turner, how do you feel about your son's confession?" "Jessica, is it true you encouraged your husband to break the law?" Jessica shoved her way through the crowd, her face twisted with rage. She shouted over the reporters, her voice shrill. "He's lying. They're both liars. I'm the victim here." The crowd didn't buy it. The very same reporters who once sympathized with her now turned their questions sharp. "If you were the victim, why are there recordings of you threatening him? Why did you post mocking comments about your mother-in-law while she was in the hospital? Isn't it true your own friends have distanced themselves from you?" Jessica froze, the cameras catching every flicker of panic on her face. For the first time, she didn't have a rehearsed answer. She turned on her heel, shoving past the microphones, her heels clacking against the pavement as she stormed off. The crowd followed, shouting her name, but she didn't look back. That night, Michael sat across from me at the kitchen table. His hands shook as he stirred a cup of coffee he never drank. "Mom, if the judge rules against me, I could go to jail. I could lose everything. I don't know if I can do this." I reached across the table, covering his trembling hands with mine. "You've already lost everything that mattered, Michael. But you're gaining something you never had before, your integrity. If you stand tall, no matter what the judge decides, you'll walk out a man. That's something Jessica can't touch." For a long moment, he just stared at me. Then, slowly, he nodded. The final hearing came a week later. The courtroom was packed, neighbors, reporters, curious strangers. Everyone wanted to see the end of the war that had consumed our lives. Jessica entered last, her once perfect appearance unraveling. Her hair was messy, her eyes hollow, her clothes wrinkled. Gone was the polished queen bee. In her place stood a desperate woman clinging to the last threads of control. The judge called the room to order. His voice was firm, measured, but heavy with finality. After reviewing the evidence, the testimony, and the behavior displayed in this courtroom, I am prepared to give my ruling. The room fell silent. You could hear the scrape of pens as reporters leaned forward, ready to capture every word. First, the judge said the allegations against Mrs. Margaret Turner are unfounded. There is no evidence she manipulated her son's finances or drove her husband away. In fact, the evidence shows the opposite, that she provided for her son generously, only to be repaid with disrespect and neglect. A murmur rippled through the room. I exhaled slowly, relief washing over me. Second, the judge continued, Jessica Turner's claims for spousal support are hereby denied. Her actions, both in and out of this courtroom, demonstrate bad faith, manipulation, and cruelty. Furthermore, her threats and falsified evidence will be referred to the district attorney for review. Jessica's face went white. She gripped the table, her knuckles pale, her lips trembling. Finally, the judge said, turning to Michael, your confession was noted. While your actions at your workplace will be forwarded for further review, the court recognizes that you accepted responsibility rather than compounding your mistakes with lies. That honesty is rare, and it will be considered in any future proceedings. Michael bowed his head, tears streaming silently down his cheeks. The gavel struck. This case is closed. The courtroom erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Neighbors whispered. Some even clapped. But Jessica didn't move. She stood frozen, shaking her head violently as if refusing to accept the reality she had just heard. Then, suddenly she snapped. You'll all regret this, she screamed, her voice cracking as guards stepped closer. I'll make sure you pay. You think this is over? It's not over. I'll burn it all down before I let you win. Her words echoed through the chamber as the guards escorted her out, still kicking and screaming. And just like that, the war that had consumed us for months ended not with dignity, but with her complete collapse. Outside the courthouse, Michael and I walked together through the flashing cameras. For once, he didn't look broken. He looked tired, yes, but also lighter, freer. Mom, he whispered, his voice trembling, I don't deserve you, but I swear, I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving I can be better. Tears stung my eyes. I wrapped my arm around his, holding him close. Then start today, Michael. Start by walking forward with me. The rest will follow. As we stepped into the sunlight, I realized the truth. My revenge had begun with 6 words and a single phone call. But what it gave me was far more than justice. It gave me back a son who finally understood the weight of love, the cost of cruelty, and the value of humility. And for the first time in years, I felt hope. The storm had finally passed, though the wreckage it left behind was everywhere. In the weeks after the judge's ruling, Jessica disappeared from the public eye. Her social media accounts went dark, her friends abandoned her, and even her wealthy parents distanced themselves to avoid the shame. Word spread that she had moved out of state, trying to rebuild her image under a new name. But for everyone who had witnessed her unraveling in court, she would forever be remembered as the woman who mocked, lied, and destroyed herself in the process. For me, revenge was never about destroying Jessica. It was about reclaiming my dignity. And with the case closed, I felt something I hadn't in years, peace. Michael's road was different. His confession about his workplace mistakes had consequences. He was suspended, investigated, and though he wasn't jailed, his career in that company was over. For a man who once measured his worth by titles and money, losing his career should have broken him. But instead, it humbled him. He took smaller jobs at first, washing cars, delivering groceries, odd work around the neighborhood. People whispered, some mocked, but Michael didn't complain. He didn't chase pride anymore. He worked quietly, steadily, and slowly started to rebuild not just his finances, but his character. Every night, he'd stop by my apartment carrying dinner or groceries. He asked me how my day was, not out of duty, but because he truly wanted to know. One night, as we ate together at the little kitchen table, he put down his fork and looked at me with tears in his eyes. "Mom," he said softly, "I can't erase what I did. I can't take back the years I let you down. But I want to spend the rest of my life making sure you never feel unloved again." I reached across the table and took his hand. For so long, I had carried anger like armor, but in that moment, I let it slip away. "Michael," I whispered, "you don't have to erase the past. Just build a better future." Months passed, and the neighborhood began to see us differently. Where once I was the drama queen mocked behind my back, now I was the woman who stood her ground, who taught her son the hardest lesson of all: respect isn't owed, it's earned. And Michael, once pitted, once mocked, slowly became known as a man trying to redeem himself. People saw him mowing lawns, helping neighbors, volunteering at the community center. Not for attention, but because he wanted to give back. One spring afternoon, we walked together past the house I had sold, the place where everything had begun. A new family lived there now. Children played in the yard, their laughter echoing through the street. Michael stopped at the edge of the sidewalk, staring at the house that was no longer his. "Do you regret it, Mom?" he asked quietly. I shook my head. No, that house was never what made us a family. Love is. Respect is. And those are things you can't buy with walls and windows. He nodded, and for the first time in years, I saw peace in his face. That night, as I sat by my window with a cup of tea, I thought about the journey. Betrayal, heartbreak, revenge. It had all led me here. And though the scars would never fully fade, I realized something important. Revenge wasn't the ending. It was only the beginning, because in teaching Michael the cost of cruelty, I had given him the chance to learn the value of kindness. And in reclaiming my dignity, I had found not just justice, but healing. My 6 words had changed everything. Sell it all. Change the will. But in the end, the greatest change wasn't in the money or the house. It was in my son. And so, our story closed not with bitterness, but with something far more powerful: a fragile, hard-earned hope. Because forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It builds a bridge to the future.